Okay, so a very warm welcome to our BioWednesday webinar today on May the 4th. My name is Alicia Gallier. I'm Business Development Manager at One Nucleus and delighted to be delivering this session in collaboration with One Nucleus partners, Appleyard Lees. Before I hand over to Barbara Fleck, who's going to be moderating our session this afternoon, just a word on the logistics side. We do actually have an in-person and virtual audience. And because of that, the Q&A is going to work slightly differently. So as well as online delegates, we are joined by some friends from Queen Mary Enterprise. And because of that, we're going to put the Q&A via an app called Slido. So if you just bear with me, I'm just going to share my screen very briefly. So what this shows is if you have a mobile device and you go to www.slido.com, you then need to enter the code 590114. And what that does is takes you to an open page where you can enter your questions. And also, if you don't have a question, but you see one that you think is interesting, you have the option to vote up questions. So if you don't think of one yourself, but another delegate poses one that you think is good and you'd like to hear the answer to, then you can choose to upvote that. So I'll just leave it up a wee while longer. As you've heard, we are recording the session, so you can catch up on the content afterwards. And in case you have any colleagues or contacts that you think may find the content interesting, then I'd be happy for you to share that recording, and that will be sent as part of the post-event follow-up after the session. So you'll get that via email. If you're not part of the panel, just be grateful if you could remain muted. That would be fantastic. Thank you. So just, I'm going to shortly take this screen down. We just had someone join. So for that person joining, just to let you know that the Q&A is going via the Slido app, and you just need to go to that URL and enter the code 590114. And I'll do a reminder of that throughout the session as well. So if I just stop sharing now, there we go. Thank you. Okay, so with that, because I know we are on a slightly tighter timescale, I'm going to hand over to Barbara to kick off the discussion. And obviously the topic is driving digitalization of life sciences. So we have an excellent panel with a lot of varied experience who can contribute their different perspectives on what that means for them in the context of life sciences. So the benefits, challenges, and sort of when we're looking at different sizes of companies, you know, how we can learn from each other in the role of collaboration. So I'm going to disappear into the background, Barbara, and hand to you. Thank you very much.
That's great. Thank you so much, Alicia. And thanks for everyone joining us this afternoon, of course. Special thanks to all the panelists. That's really great to have you all here, to have representation from very different companies and contribution to the discussion. That's really wonderful. I think before we start the discussion, it would be great if we could have an introduction from the panelists rather than me reading out your background. I'll just briefly start with myself. So my name is Barbara Fleck. I'm a patent attorney and partner at Appleyard Lees in our Cambridge office, and I head our life sciences practice. And a lot of my clients are actually based in the Cambridge area, working in very diverse technologies, including antibody therapeutics and microbiome inventions. So I'll just hand over now the way that people are ordered on the screen. So I'll start with Sven. If you could just briefly introduce yourself, please.
Thank you very much, Barbara. Thanks, everyone. Yeah, my name is Sven Zewitz. I'm the Director of Biodata Innovation at Eagle Genomics. It's a software company operating mainly out of Cambridge in the UK. My scientific background, I spent a long time in sciences, molecular biology and then translational chemistry. And then at the end, computational biology, basically that segued me into the industry that I'm in now.
Thank you, Barbara. My name is David Allen. I'm the co-founder and managing director of a cybersecurity consultancy based out of Milton Keynes. And our company really are mainly composed of ex-military, government, sort of military intelligence type people. And we cover a range of sectors. So biosciences is one of those areas, private healthcare, law. But essentially our function is trying to help you understand your risk and security and finding ways to prioritize a remediation to those risks.
Thank you very much. Anusha?
Hi, everyone. So my name is Anusha Foo. I'm a partner in KPMG and I head up the Life Science Regulatory Solutions practice. So we're a part of the broader KPMG Life Science practice, and that includes risk, consultancy, obviously technical regulatory solutions for clients, strategy, deal advisory, and a number of other areas, including testing and technology and digital transformation. And my background is over 20 years in the life science sector. I started my career early on, spent 5 years at the MHRA, and then have led large teams providing regulatory consulting, strategic advice to small startup companies in the life science sector, as well as mid-size and large pharma companies, and help them through the product lifecycle. So for medicinal products and devices. So great to be here today.
Thank you very much. And last but not least, Karim.
Barbara, thank you. My name is Karim Shah. I'm a co-founder and CEO of Rosetta Hub. I have a background in computer science and theoretical physics in previous life. And at Rosetta Hub, we're building the next generation of collaborative digital research platforms. So basically, this includes unified multi-cloud governance and management, unified multi-cloud workbenches for research, factories for data science, apps and workflows, and marketplaces and sharing hubs as a service for scientific applications. So and they have been collaborating for over a decade with the European Commission, evaluating projects in their area of e-infrastructure, high-performance computing, cloud computing, digital and innovation.
Thank you very much. So of course, the topic today is the digitalization in the life sciences. And I don't know the background of the audience. You know, some might be very familiar with this topic, and to others it might be perhaps less familiar. So I think it would be really good to set the scene with what do we actually mean by digitalization of the life sciences. And Anusha, I'd like to start with you and see what your definition is.
Thanks, Barbara. I think it could be interpreted in a very broad way. For me, digitalization in life sciences is really improving, for a company to improve their business model by using digital technologies. And in life sciences, that would be, you know, to drive value in the business, but also to improve patient outcomes, because ultimately, life science companies are striving to address unmet medical need or develop medicinal products or devices to improve patient outcomes. So I think there's a broad application for the question. Digitalization, I've worked with many companies at various stages as their digitalization strategy is evolving. And so I think it's such a broad area, and look forward to a great discussion. But I think at the heart of what we're talking about today is really trying to improve your business model and drive value and develop an optimal business model through digital technologies.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I wonder, Sven, what your view is. You've just explained to us you have a very interdisciplinary background. So I think that sort of gives you perhaps a very interesting perspective, depending on what hat you are wearing. So what is your definition?
Yeah, thanks. So I think it's very much following on from what Anusha said. It is very diverse, that without doubt. So traditionally, I would probably say it starts with the automation potentially of data generation, but it goes on very long way from that. So this is usually where we come in at a much later stage in the process. And I think increasingly, of course, data is ubiquitous, but the human interface with that data is still really challenging, and understanding that vast array of data. and deriving value from that data is still, I think, very, very diversified, often siloed, and there's a huge amount of disconnect between different data assets, but specifically in our clients, which are often large conglomerates, international companies. And managing all those processes, it's probably more than one process at heart. And this is the big challenge I think this industry faces, is that we can't just say it is X. It is part of this, part of that, and part of other, which makes it, of course, much more challenging and interesting. Because there is regulatory aspects, as Anusha will, of course, know about, but there's also even claims and even marketing and just basic communication. And I think one of the most interesting aspects is that it's also change management for people and the way they work, which might be overlooked. It's not a purely technological challenge. It's also nearly some kind of even a psychological or communication challenge. So it's very diverse and wide. And I'm also just, really looking forward to the different perspectives of all the panelists and the questions from the audience.
Thank you. I think you actually take me on quite neatly to my first question, because you and in fact, Anusha, you already mentioned some areas which are challenges as well as advantages. So, the benefit for patients has been mentioned, improving patient outcome, Anusha, that's what you said. And Sven, you also mentioned that actually the challenge often lies in driving value from data, and the work can be a bit siloed and disconnected. And actually one thing that I was going to ask you all is, where do you see the challenges as well as the opportunities in digitalization of life sciences? And actually, I would like to ask that question to Karim.
Thank you, Barbara. Actually, I would like to, I very much agree, of course, with my colleagues' points of view. And I would like to add to what Sven has just said, is that it's not a technological upgrade of the company or the institution. It's more of a cultural change, and change management and leadership is at the heart of anything that you would be envisaging. Again, the world is a little bit a big bag that people nowadays do not anymore understand exactly what it covers and where it starts and where it ends. But basically looking at the challenges and seeing how to produce impact could be a way to get started and basically do digital transformation right. So in the case of life sciences, what are the challenges today? The increased complexity of problems that they have to solve. The fact that they need to care for people in a tailored way, which is very difficult. The need of increasing agility and ability to adapt to change, the change of the market, the change or the disruption of the supply chain, the changes or basically rivals and the strategies of the competition. All these are things that are really daily challenges and it is vital to be able to cope. They have also, like Sven said, to be able to deal with the data deluge and to get insight from the data effectively and to be able really to get the most out of the data in a robust, reliable, reproducible, explainable way. And also there is an urge today beyond traceability or reproducibility of what you do, to be able to interact with your ecosystem and to collaborate and share and really progress while working with others and not reinventing the wheel and not reproducing data and not redesigning tools from scratch all the time.
Mm-hmm. So Dave, I want to pass over to you now, because you come obviously from a very different viewpoint, because you work in cybersecurity. So I imagine perhaps that falls more, well, naively, I might think that's the challenges here. How can we actually keep all this data safe? How can we keep the business safe while undergoing the digital transformation? And I imagine that those are the challenges that you are dealing with, but I'm sure you will tell me that you also see opportunities. So I'd like to hear your view.
Or defenders, I think. So everything that my colleagues have said around that the human elements of digital transformation, I think, is really important. And I think cybersecurity, or if we talk slightly differently and talk about business resilience, I think is a more appropriate term rather than cybersecurity for an organization. I think it needs to be factored in at the very start of any digital transformation program, and that culture of thinking about your organization as an operationally resilient sort of ecosystem of capability and skills and people, and needs to be sort of planned in from the start. And what I mean by that is digital transformation programs are often about increasing availability and making things quicker and connecting things, and the efficiencies around an organization. And security or resilience tends to be something that is thought of when that's all created, and there's more of it's almost an assurance add-on at the end. And I think the way any organization needs to think about this properly is start with security or resilience right at the very start of that conversation when they're building the digital transformation programs. So the opportunity there is, if you do it at the start, then the culture of the organization starts to change with that digital transformation program, and security and business resilience become a part of that culture. If you do it at the end, it feels like an add-on and people pay lip service to it, and the cultural buy-in isn't as strong. So I think the opportunities is do it at the start and it becomes part of your business, the business resilience, security, whatever you want to call it. If you do it at the end, then there's a big challenge and a big risk for the business trying to tackle on afterwards.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd like to come back perhaps with another question on the sort of cultural change and the buy-in that actually both you have mentioned now, Dave, and also Karim. So that clearly seems to be a very interesting area to just change the culture. And I'd like to come back to that. But for now, I just want to pass on to Anusha, talking about challenges and opportunities. And one opportunity that you have already mentioned really in your definition is the real opportunity here to do good for patients and to improve the outcome for patients, which is of course what most organizations in our sector really want to contribute to. So it'd be really interesting to hear a few more thoughts from you on that.
Yes, I think there's huge potential with digitalisation in the industry. Through the COVID pandemic, I mean, the whole of the life science sector had to rapidly adapt to ensure business continuity, maintain products, patients being able to access products, to being able to attend clinical research. And it took a huge shift in the approach of businesses. And suddenly, as in every sector, everyone had to move to a virtual way of working. And what was really impressive, I think, was the approach of the regulators. And they were very pragmatic, and they did adapt to all of the challenges of the pandemic and issued guidance to virtual ways of working. For instance, in the R&D setting, there was excellent guidance produced very quickly, international collaboration between FDA, EMA, and every regulator around the globe to ensure that patients could still receive healthcare treatment, access to medicines in a safe way that was approved by the regulators. And the great thing is that collaboration continues, and I think there's a real acceptance of a shift and a move towards more virtual ways of working, especially in the R&D sphere. And what we are in KPMG, in the regulatory solutions practice, we're working with a number of biotech and tech startup companies in the artificial intelligence in healthcare sphere. And there are some amazing advances with tech startups developing algorithms and using machine learning to improve patient outcomes and advance the development of really exciting new products in AI in healthcare and the digital healthcare arena. So it's a very exciting time, and there's fantastic opportunities. But for businesses to be able to realize all of the potential of digitalization, I think it is critical to understand the culture of the business, to really understand what all of the different silos, different parts of the business, the critical activities that individuals are involved with, and to ensure that you have appropriate GXP compliance and testing frameworks for digital technologies. Because as David mentioned, cybersecurity, data privacy is critical in life sciences, and ensuring that you deploy digital advancements and new technologies in a regulatory compliant way, depending on where your business is operating. And with the with the complexity of data privacy, cybersecurity requirements, and the constant threat of cybersecurity attacks for large pharmaceutical companies, but companies at every stage of, from biotechs and mid-sized pharma, it's a delicate balance between managing the great opportunities with the threats to the organization and to patients, and protecting patient data and the outcomes. So massive opportunities in this space, and the regulators are developing guidance in the area of AI in healthcare. It's an emerging field, looking at how we use automation, artificial intelligence, and predictive algorithms to develop healthcare tools and utilizing machine learning. So that really is the new frontier in healthcare, and the regulators are stepping up to the challenge, I think. So we're just watching that carefully. So that's the great opportunity.
Yeah, so massive opportunities and some challenges there. And on the challenges, I think there was something, Sven, that you mentioned in your definition about the disconnect still and some siloed working, and but also you mentioned that there's an opportunity in actually driving value from data. And I think this is really what Eagle Genomics do, and driving value from the data and the platform that you have developed in the company. So I wonder if you want to expand a little bit on the opportunities and challenges.
Sure, happy to. So yeah, I think so. First of all, I think it's a really interesting time, but also there's still quite of a divide in the different markets. So we've heard about patient care and medical data. Now our clientele are not pharmaceutical industries, but it's the food industry or the agri-tech industry or the beauty and personal care industry. This is not to say that they don't have data, and they do. They have vast amounts of data, and they're trying to drive value from that, which in a sense is going to benefit potentially even more people, right? Because we all eat even if we're not sick. But there is a very different regulatory framework around that, which has very, very deep consequences, for example, on data standardization and data governance. And so in our case, we would nearly welcome stricter regulatory input, because it means that there would be a potentially stronger drive for data harmonization or regulatory or alignment of workflows. So this makes our case a bit more difficult. So, but it also means there's a lot more inefficiencies in the system, which means there's a lot more value to be had if we manage to make these processes more efficient. And then just a slight segue, because we heard that from AI, and of course it was just a matter of time before we came on that topic. I think just as David is clear, and I think is correct to saying that you can't think of security at the end. I think with AI, and especially patient-sensitive information, you can't think of ethics at the end. We've had, not personally, but we've had cases known in the literature where algorithms are trained on data sets that are not inclusive, right, or that are biased in some way. And this is a real problem in many cases, not in ours yet particularly, but I think for the industry and for how we appreciate and how we as a society trust even these algorithms. So these are just two cases where I think there's still a lot of work to be done going forward. Excuse me.
Thank you. I want to go back to Dave and actually ask you, what is your sort of top tip for strategy, especially for small companies? And coming from a perspective where you want to protect or make sure that you help companies to protect themselves from attacks and potentially loss of data or data becoming public and really affecting their business. And I'm sure you can share some sort of top tips that companies could implement to really strengthen their position and make sure that their business is secure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think although every company is different and every company will have a different set of needs, I think there's a basic framework that every company can follow. So there's five headings, really easy to remember. The primary one is prepare. And what I mean by that is just have an instant response plan of some sort. It doesn't matter how immature it is, but at least know that if something happens, you know who you're going to call, what information you need to capture, and what your contingency plans are. So that's the primary objective. And that will mature as your organization matures. The second step is identify. And that's really trying to understand your business. And that's not just about your information assets, but that's about how your business is structured. And you can there's different methodologies. You can do what's called a crown jewel analysis, where you identify what are the critical components of your business. So what can your business not do without? And that might be IP, it might be a particular system, it might be an algorithm, what data sets, whatever it is. But identify that, and then that's what you'll build concentric rings of steel around. The next stage is protect. So whatever you learn and identify, then you need to start to implement some sort of protection around those assets. And that will be an ever-going concern for your organization, budgets and priority, dependent. And once you've got that set up, that's where a lot of companies stop. And I think what we've seen with the proliferation of ransomware, it's almost ubiquitous in organizations. And I think what companies aren't doing is detection and proactive detection. So the next step is find a way to proactively detect threats on your network, and find a way to proactively identify threats in your supply chain. But what I mean by that is hold your suppliers the same standards as you hold yourself. Every incident we've been to, every healthcare instance over the last 3 years has had a supplier-enabled attack vector, whether it's an RDP gateway, so a remote access server for like a HVAC supplier, heating and ventilation supplier, or a firewall that's been outsourced but hasn't been updated by the supplier. They're really easy things to outsource and forget about. And what we're saying is you need to bring the responsibility and risk management and the monitoring of those outsourced assets back to your organization and your governance. And then finally is assurance. So a lot of organizations we speak to want a pen test or a penetration test. And a penetration test is essentially a simulated attack on the organization. But we would always say that you do that last. If we were to do a penetration test on most organizations, we will break in, because we've got a team of experts. Whereas if you do that at the end of a rigorous digitization program, and you use that as your assurance thing at the end, your assurance activity at the end, then that gives you and your organization the assurance that what you've done works. Whereas if you do it at the start, you're just finding holes in an organization you don't understand. So those are the 5 steps: prepare, identify, protect, detect, and assure. What you do at each one of those phases will depend on your business. There's all sorts of frameworks out there. It'll depend on whether you're a big international pharma or you're a small 3-man startup based in Cambridge. But if you follow those guidelines, then you'll be able to find good advice at each one of those steps.
Thank you. I hope we've all taken notes of those 5 snazzy steps. Thanks for distilling a very complex area into 5 very succinct and memorable steps. So that's, I think, really useful to the audience. Karim, I wonder what your view is on the strategy, because I want to pick up on something that you said when we talked about the challenges and the opportunities. And I think one of the first things that you mentioned was the the change management and leadership to drive that change, and to do that in an organization and to have change accepted. And then we know that change is always difficult for most people and does require management. I wonder if that feeds into the strategy that you would recommend to achieve a successful digital transformation in a business.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that in order for something to happen, you need people to agree. You need to build a consensus about a common understanding, a common agreement about the core objectives and the core values. And within those core objectives, you need to identify those where digital can bring high impact at manageable cost. So don't start by the most difficult and complex problem first. Start with something that actually would deliver value quickly with the available resources and available skills, and build on that. Basically, it's a journey, and that journey needs to be planned carefully and needs to be done with everyone involved, basically putting their best into it. And so having like low pain, high gain at a strategy at the beginning, and basically take an area and just produce something that clearly brings value to a specific customer, or clearly improve the agility of the company while dealing with a specific problem, or basically something that changes life and or changes the numbers and revenue over investment in a clear manner, would bring or fuel the drive and fuel the motivation during that journey toward being transformed. There is one thing that is actually can be problematic, is the fact to be overwhelmed by everything. So basically, we heard that there is an absolute need for cybersecurity as job zero. We need that there is an urge for dealing with compliance and regulation from day one. That's also a job zero. But there is also a long list of cutting edge technologies that are also associated to the digital transformation. You name them, cloud computing technologies, edge computing and IoT, data analytics and AI, blockchain, quantum computing. All those technologies, DevOps practices and tool chains, all those are part potentially of the enablers, or what you need to put on the table while you are proceeding with your digital transformation. And the whole lot of this is just too much. That's something that you need to bear in mind, and to find a way basically to get something done, to have like successes that kind of chain one after the other in order for you to get things done. And there is also one aspect of digital that actually can be a saver, is that digital is correlated to automation. And automation means that some of all this can be done by those and can be delegated. If you go to the cloud, then there is a lot that you can just forget about and let the cloud provider deal with it. The everything as a service approach, where potentially you would pick a software as a service wherever applicable, and never try to reinvent the wheel or do something that is not your core competency or your core business. So that approach is one that would mitigate risks and make you progress towards in that journey in the most effective way. Basically, bites should be manageable. Bites should not be too big.
Thank you. Sven, I hand over to you now. Do you feel also that there are so many tools out there, as Karim just explained, with all these buzzwords flying around, all these technologies and blockchain and AI and machine learning, that sometimes that actually is so overwhelming, perhaps, that it could hinder a business in achieving this digital transformation, because they're just a bit like a rabbit in the headlights. Where do we even start here?
I think that's a really, really important question, and we come to that very similar way from Karim. It's the low-hanging fruit. You have to start somewhere, because also the business has to justify their expense and their engagement to engage in such a thing. But again, it does come down to leadership. So I think there's a balance between long-term vision, where the companies know they have to engage and embark on that journey, but making sure that the steps aren't too arduous along the way. But it is hard to line up everything, right? Because I think we don't want to create new pockets, new disconnected things, but at the same time, you have to start with something that creates, value within short term. And first process is always understanding what for that particular company would be the most advantageous project. And that varies, of course, because that varies also along the maturity scale of the company. Some companies come to us and they say they have no data. Right? And then we say, well, you probably do. It just, you don't consider it to be data. They have loads of data. It's just not measurements. They haven't conducted their own experiments. They have loads of process data. They have loads of, knowledge, which is hidden in, hundreds of, PowerPoints or something, which is again disconnected. So the problems are very diverse. And so depending on where the company is in their maturity scale, our approach will be different. But I think in most cases, what is also fascinating is just to realize is how much human effort has gone into creating those reports. And then they get used once, right? And then and that's it. But there is so much value in all of these, in this collected knowledge. And this has not been assetized in a way, right? It's just been used once and then forgotten. And many of our clients say, if we only knew what we know, and that knowledge is just gets lost. So part of it is change management, is cultural management, is then it is putting improved processes into place, and I think we're really at the beginning, and this is where I'm not here to plug our company, but any kind of platform which can lead to collaboration, right? I think we heard that before as well, and data sharing, I think, is a really, really important aspects. And then again, to different degrees, to data standardization. I think we're really still at the beginning. I sometimes feel like we're in the US, where there's, I don't know how many private steam companies with different gauges of the railway tracks and everything. And it's completely unconnected, and everybody can see that they're doing something valuable. But there's roadblocks, every couple of hours, every day. So we still have a long way to go to make sure that we really draw the most value from all these technologies. And I think there's going to be room for all of us to keep collaborating and talking about this.
So collaboration is really a buzzword here, and thanks for picking up on that, because it has been mentioned by quite a few speakers. Hopefully we'll have a bit more time to discuss that in more detail. But before we do that, Anusha, you've worked with clients of all sizes, haven't you? You've mentioned startups, you've worked with bigger companies, and I imagine that the strategy for digital transformation has something to do with the size of the company and how different companies approach it. So I wonder what your view is on the strategy that companies should implement, and what could help them to implement a robust strategy.
Yes, I think there are a lot. I think when you're talking to small startups, biotechs, medtech companies, there's a lot of barriers to adopting complex digital technology solutions. And so they have to carefully evaluate what's on offer in the market, what is compliant, what they can implement, which has the most value for their business and is the most cost effective, but still compliant. And we work with a number of companies to evaluate the different digital technologies that could support their business at an early stage. And also, you would be surprised, but a lot of larger life science organizations also are impacted through acquisitions of other businesses, and then the technology integration and harmonizing digital technologies across different legacy organizations is a big challenge. And we see that there are still a lot of manual processes that need to be automated, even in large organizations. For instance, there's a big interest at the moment in lab automation, I would say, in the industry. And how do you automate those complex processing from samples through to biobanks, or it's really complex limb systems upgrades, and automation is a big theme that's coming through at the moment for large organizations. So I think there's challenges at both ends of the spectrum. There are barriers for smaller companies to adopt the most advanced digital technologies. And I think that can be, that can hinder how they scale up the business, because there's a basic level of digital technology compliance that you have to have in an organization to interact with the regulators and to operate to the correct levels of compliance for different jurisdictions. But it's interesting, so interesting to see even the larger organizations struggling with Excel sheets, manual entry of data, and trying to automate these old legacy processes from multiple parts of their business and legacy businesses. So digitalization is a huge area that companies struggle with, I think, and needs support. Often we work with organizations to help different parts of their business, different functions, map what is it that you're doing, what are the best technologies that could support your parts of the business, and then how do you pull all of those strands together to have a cohesive approach, digitalization strategy for the entire business. And often companies look at the customer model, like, so what are the end customers for our business, internal stakeholders, external stakeholders? How do we utilize that customer-led vision to gain the best insights and really put together a digital strategy that will take them through the next 10 to 15 years, so the future vision of the business. So it's a hugely complex area, and companies at every stage of that journey are still struggling with trying to, multiple upgrades to existing technology. And I think the biggest question is, how do you pull all of the information together through disparate functions and automate and really evaluate the risks at an organization level and ensure compliance at the same time?
Thank you. I would like to talk a little bit about collaboration, but it occurs to me that we've been chatting away for about 45 minutes, and Alicia did share the information on the app and how to pose questions to the panel. So I just wanted to see, Alicia, if there's any questions that have come in, to give the audience the opportunity to ask questions. I think the event is scheduled for about an hour, isn't it? So we have until 1:15, and if there's any questions, we could take them now. If not, then I'm very happy to go on and we can talk a bit more about collaboration.
Thank you, Barbara. So I don't have any questions as yet. I'm also conscious that some delegates joined after I'd given the instructions. So just to kind of make it a bit easier, if you do have a question, and it's easier for you to raise your hand using the Zoom chat function. So on the bottom of your screen, there's a reaction button. You can use that to raise your hand. Then I can keep an eye on delegates who have indicated they have a question that way. Of course, you can still use the Slido app if you wish. But in the meantime, Barbara, yeah, if you'd like to pose the question, and then I can come back on and let you know if there's any audience questions.
Sure. Collaboration has come up mentioned by a few of you, and I wonder if we could talk about collaboration as a driver to drive forward, essentially, digital transformation. And so for example, I wonder if you agree with this, is sort of slightly off topic perhaps, but I've heard it say that COVID, the pandemic, has perhaps increased collaboration between big pharma and small companies. I don't know if that is a contentious view or people agree with it. But what about digital transformation? Is that actually a driver for collaboration between big pharma and biotech, smaller biotech companies, or is that something that could make collaboration more difficult? What do you think, Karim?
And the answer is quite easy. Definitely, digitalization makes collaboration easier. An example, you are doing artificial or AI machine learning on data that is living on a public cloud, say AWS or Azure or GCP. And the way for you to make what you are doing accessible to collaborators, could that be a peer company or big pharma, is extremely simplified by the fact that you are on the public cloud. The fact, actually, when it comes to where the data lives and what's the tool chain for operating on the data, it is good news that things have a little bit settled towards embracing the public cloud where applicable, and also about unifying and creating some form of interoperation with regards to the data formats, to the tools, to the infrastructure. And that's all goes in the direction of making things easy to share. So basically, typically your workflow on genomic data could be captured in a digital artifact, which is the infrastructure as code plus containers plus data. You wrap this and you can share it with anyone, anywhere, a big pharma or a peer company that you collaborate with, and instantly they are able to reproduce and do whatever you have done with the data and with the tools and with the algorithms. So basically, digital makes collaboration much easier, much more effective, while having some code that will automate for you compliance and cybersecurity and enforcement of all kind of rules that you would like to enforce or to make sure that they are there when you are sharing data or sharing anything that is valuable to you.
Mm-hmm. So with enhanced collaboration, do we have more challenges in terms of cybersecurity, Dave?
Yep, absolutely. I think one of the things that whenever we're doing a simulated attack on an organization or a number of organizations, we always look to exploit trust and points of interaction. So the more trust and points of interaction there are within an organization, the more opportunities we've got to exploit that organization. So if you're a big pharma organization, for example, and you've got a very robust security profile, but you're working with a smaller bio company who maybe doesn't have as much money to spend on their security, maybe has skipped over a few things in the interests of getting ahead quicker, then that's the organization I'm going to attack. And then I'll use that as a platform to attack the bigger organization because there's established trust. So when I talked about before about resilience, I think as you increase collaboration in any form, you need to keep an eye on all the things that make your organization resilient. And that includes your suppliers, any points of trust. So definitely, yeah, I don't want to be the security guy who talks about risk all the time, but that's my job, so I will. Yeah, increase collaboration, definitely increase risks for attackers. Mm-hmm. Opportunity, sorry.
Sven, you did mention collaboration previously. Do you think it drives digitalization? It helps or hinders?
No, I think it definitely drives, and it also drives innovation greatly. So, you know, if I think back at my molecular biology days, I think it was always clear that the moment bacteria had evolved ways to exchange DNA, right, that always drives, you know, massive innovation, and now some cases to our detriment because they're able to exchange, you know, antibiotic resistance cassettes and everything. So it's a key driver. Exchanging information is a key driver of innovation and a key driver of all these processes. And I completely hear what David is saying, and that's something that, you know, we always also take very seriously in our certification process within the company. So I think without doubt, the speed at which large amounts of information can be transferred is incredible. The speed at which the information is extracted is also now increasing. So we have these new concepts, you know, looking ahead of federated learning, where, you know, not just the data is exported, but also the code to, you know, understand the data is not even run locally, but could be federated. So I think there's enormous amounts of potential. I'm trying to always think of sort of, you know, an evolutionary framework. You know, what comes then and what are the counteractions of that? And we're already seeing that, you know, opening up your organization to information increases the risk. You know, putting more trust in the data means we know less maybe about the data. We might know less about why the data is being used, or we have less control over the decisions being made. You know, as soon as we delegate the decision making to algorithms, we know very little about, you know, what that decision is based on. And I think we are going to head to that direction, I think, of where we have to face these questions of, you know, what are we actually exporting? What are we letting go by using more and more automated systems? This is going to come. And in some cases, it's already here. And to both benefit, you know, we might not want to make the decision of what, you know, how to best produce something, but we might want to make the decision of how to best treat a patient, or it might be too complicated. We have the panel a few weeks ago. I think one of your colleagues mentioned that there are already 70 different treatment regimes for breast cancer. 7-0. So which GP can actually make sure that they're following the right treatment path for one disease? So obviously we need smart procedures. But at the same time, what if it goes wrong? Who's responsible? I think we're heading towards really challenging, intellectually challenging problems, which maybe is good because then all the nuts and bolts can be dealt with by someone else. But we are going to face these problems.
Yeah, I think that again really emphasizes the complexity of this whole area. Many parts of it are very complex, and the possibilities are also enormous. But yeah, to make informed decisions, especially with the example that you just mentioned, is very hard. The final word I want to give to Anusha. Please let us know what you see in your practice working with your clients. Are they collaborating? Does collaboration help the digital transformation? We've heard from everyone so far that it does, although there are challenges in terms of security when information is exchanged, but certainly it seems to really drive the transformation process. Is that what you have seen as well?
Yes, I think for over the last 5 to 10 years, really the R&D paradigm has changed, and so we see a lot of large pharma companies now. They've always looking for the biotech startup, tech startup companies who are more the disruptors in terms of digital innovation in the industry. And so there's a number of deals, acquisitions and mergers, asset divestment to large pharma companies. And in order to, come together and collaborate and to acquire the smaller biotech companies, I think the due diligence of the smaller companies, evaluating their digital infrastructure, how they secure their data, all of the aspects of due diligence for the asset and their pipeline of products is critical. So it's a very interesting space at the moment. We work with a lot of startup biotechs that have spun out of academic institutions, and there's a lot of digital innovation and biotech companies, medtech companies, tech startup companies really disrupting the space and developing novel technologies, advanced therapy products, as I mentioned, AI technology as well. And the large pharma companies are really supplementing their R&D pipelines with these fantastic biotech companies that have developed these great products and really leading the way in terms of innovation, digital, innovations and product development. And so what's really important for the small biotech companies to be evaluated and to collaborate fully with large pharma and to be compliant is to have a very robust digital infrastructure, which is compliant, important to have the appropriate cybersecurity measures, data privacy infrastructure, and that Dave had mentioned. All of these aspects are really important for the small biotech companies. They have very aggressive accelerated pathways to approval as well. And that's why they're so interesting, exciting, developing these novel technologies, achieving breakthrough designation, fast track designation, accelerated assessment routes to patients. And so it's having, ensuring that balance with compliance and having the appropriate digital infrastructure to enable them to collaborate and form partnerships with large pharma companies. I think that's critical. But there's a lot of great collaboration, happening in the industry, and it's, I would say, the best part of it is the improving patient outcomes and really the accelerating, getting the most novel products that can really address unmet medical need, getting them to patients faster through these collaborations.
Yeah. That's actually a very nice note to finish on, because in fact, we sort of gone full circle, haven't we? Because we started the discussion with you and trying to define what we mean by this digital transformation, and you mentioned the improvement of patient outcomes, which I think was echoed by all the speakers, although we mustn't just limit it to patients. There are healthcare issues generally. Us full circle, I think, which is really nice. So Alicia, are there any questions for the panel from the audience?
I have one through, yep, so I'll just throw it out there to the panel and whoever wants to take it on. So there are many tools such as smart sheets. That means customers don't have to reinvent the wheel. So how are companies investigating which software and tools to use? Who would like to take that? No?
There's so much.
Anusha?
I'd just say, I mean, we work with companies all the time to look at the technology they have, what they're trying to achieve, and how other solutions in the market maybe, provide the customer benefits that they're looking for. So usually it starts with mapping the existing architecture of technology and then trying to achieve the business's ultimate goals. It is a complex process. Smart sheets are, used by a number of companies, but there are so many systems. I think that's part of the complexity and the challenge for organizations, isn't it, to optimize those?
Excellent, thank you. Oh, Karim, yeah.
I would just add that in this realm, there is a critical role played by open source software that should always be considered and explored. When it comes to data analytics or machine learning or infrastructure as code, everything basically now is often having good answer in the open source realm, and open source is a way to make things easy to reproduce and easy to share and get others really to build on top of. So yeah, I think it's an important trend to always consider.
Thank you both very much. We don't have time as such, but one sort of question that had come to me was obviously, we've mentioned getting drugs to market faster. That's something our sector is always sort of focused on, and that's what we're trying to develop and optimize. I guess the other challenge is inclusivity and accessibility for different populations around the world. So if we had more time, maybe looking at how digitalisation could be enhancing that, I think could be a really interesting discussion, but maybe we'll have to do a future BioWednesday on that topic. But we are sort of coming up near to time. I can't see any sort of hands raised. Just to say, if after the session, any of the delegates online or in person would like me to sort of facilitate a connection with any of the panel members or Barbara, then please do let me know, and I'm more than happy to arrange that. Special thank you to the panel and to Barbara for facilitating the discussion. The insights are really interesting, really fascinating, and I guess a topic we'll definitely revisit and keep discussing, and having those key learnings between companies of different stages of their growth is something that is really important to make sure we're sharing those tips and practices. So with that, I'm going to bring the session to a close and just thank everyone very much for attending. Thanks all, and have a good rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank
you. Thanks very much.